Welcome to Talk Design Podcast, the space where creativity meets conversation. I'm Adrian Ramsey, your host, and as someone deeply entrenched in the world of design, I'm thrilled to introduce you to the minds that inspire me in the hope that they will spark something special within you too. From a design past crafting women's swimwear to pushing the boundaries of performance sportswear, from mountaineering to international yachting, to implementing systematic innovation solutions that transcend boundaries in aerospace industry. My heart remains rooted in architecture, and exploring the emotional tapestry woven by built spaces is my fascination. My journey in design has been what can only be described as a life of design. I want to thank you for lending me your ears. I'm eager to embark on this next episode together. And for those of you who prefer to watch and listen, you can catch this episode at YouTube. That's youtube.com/@TalkDesignPodcast. My guests on Talk Design today, David and Marina from Fame Architecture and Design in Los Angeles. Now, they do cover a whole lot of the Californian coast and beyond. We're going to get into that. They're also really well known for an amazing podcast that they run called Second Studio Pod, which is, I'm going to let you go and look it up. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to let you go and look it up. You'll really enjoy it. It's a great podcast. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
It's an absolute joy to have you.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to be here.
I've listened to your show a whole lot, and we have some people that we know in common as well. And we probably have a lot of people we know in common when it really comes down to the different architects that we've both spoken to over time. You know, like, so we should do a show on the stories between them. That would be funny.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find really interesting in podcasting is you know, you take somebody who's done a lot, like a lot of interviews, and they have an interview style, and they kind of turn it on when they're going to be interviewed, and they've got like a rote story that they've told 10 million times, and it doesn't necessarily seem fresh. Anyway, we will come back to that. We'll come back to that. I want to kick off by understanding, and your story is out there, so I don't want the regular story, but at some point, you know, you're a little girl, you're a little boy, and you found architecture through something, because you could have done anything creative. Face it, you know, there's tons of creativity in you, there's tons of analytics in you. Why architecture? Why'd you choose this? Why don't you do something really good? You know, no, something
more fun, something less stressful. That's a good question.
With less compliance.
Yeah.
Nobody can sue you for it. Yeah. Marina,
exactly.
Kick us off.
Something with lower stakes, maybe.
Well, I mean, you know, I think it probably came from my dad. My dad was not an architect. I mean, he was an electrical architect. So he was designing all of the wiring on cars. He's kind of like genius guy who didn't really go into school very long, but manages to understand and put things together without really thinking much, which is amazing. But I basically grew up kind of like watching him, you know, build things at home, renovate our house, add the story. So there was always like tools and dust and running to Home Depot and buying supplies and building stuff without plans and kind of like the magic of projects. But growing up, I had no idea what an architect was. I mean, you know, in France, you're taught about architecture through like castles and churches from the Renaissance and those types of architect. But modern architecture was not even a thing that was, you know, in my mind. So I was taking art classes, and one of my teachers was an architect, and I had a kind of a love relationship with homes, just driving by houses, like looking at how they were put together, what they looked like, if they were appealing or the opposite, you know.
And more often the opposite.
More often times, the opposite. And so that teacher was an architect, and I was like, you know, I think I would want to do like the design of, you know, like the interiors of homes. And he actually kind of like rerouted me and told me, well, you know, if you want to move a post or a column, you're going to need an architect. And I was kind of like in the mindset, like, I don't want to need anybody. So in that case, I'm just going to go to architecture. And that's kind of how I ended up into architecture. And I think I really found the place where I belong, because I'm still very much interested and do a lot of work on the interior aspects of homes, but I get to understand them from all it takes to create them. So I'm still trying to convince my dad to use me to do plans when he has, projects that he's trying to build, but he has absolutely no interest in me helping him.
He's more of the like, just build it and figure it out as you go.
Yeah, I'll draw the picture when it's done.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like giving him feedbacks, and he just does not want to hear that.
It could have turned out better if you had plans, but that's not how he does it. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of that's probably how I got into it. My mom was very much into, colors and putting things together at home. Like she was a working mom. She, never went to the university or had any like big high diplomas, but she was very much about making sure her house felt really nice and welcoming and comfortable and changing things around. So I think the combination of them two just naturally guided me into where I'm today.
Yeah, right. That's cool. That's really cool. What part of France were you born in, and where did you grow up?
I was born close to Paris, but I grew up about an hour north of Paris in the countryside, in the region called Picardy. It's not the most sexy region in France, I would say. So when people ask, I'm like, yeah, if you go to France, you don't have to go there. Like there's not a whole lot to see. But small town, 6,000 people, countryside, like nothing very exciting.
Although as an American, I think it's really cool to grow up in a town that has a chateau.
But every town has a chateau.
I know, but for an American, it's like, you have a castle in your town?
I'm with you, man. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you've got a castle in your town. Like, it's cool. Really
We've
cool.
all watched Game of Thrones. Like, castles. But I mean, it was great for a kid, but as you grow up and mature, like I was, I think, a very curious child. Like I love learning, and still today, like I love learning new things and meeting people and kind of like understanding the world like constantly. So the countryside felt a little bit too dead for me.
Yeah, I think there's a lovely tension between cities and countryside, loving being in nature and stuff, but then the push and the bustle and the drive that a city takes. And there's something magic about that as well. Like I need a real balance. You said before it wasn't the sexiest place in France. Tell me some sexy places in France.
Well,
beyond Paris.
Paris is,
because that's
another
place, country.
But it's a different beast.
It's a different beast.
There is a lot of very different magical places in France. My parents.
You started it. I'm just following it.
I don't know. I mean, my parents moved recently, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. They retired to more like the center south of France, which maybe is not super well known because there is Provence, there is the coast, the French Riviera.
So are they in the Lot-et-Garonne? Are they down by Agen or somewhere?
They're between Toulouse and Bordeaux.
Sure. I've lived there.
So,
yeah.
You did?
I like that. Yeah. That's why I wanted to know where they lived. Yeah.
And it's actually great. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Nice.
And
the weather's great, the food's great, the architecture is super interesting. I mean, like we visited a town that I've known growing up that's built in the face of a cliff. I mean, there is like some crazy stuff. Like you're like, how did people did that, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to go out of the beaten path and really like look for those little gems rather than, just the big point on the tourist book when you go places, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. We lived in a tiny village called Roquecourt. And I'm probably not saying that with a very good French accent, but you're not Parisian, so you're not going to shit on me for that.
No. Yeah. No, and my French is turning to shit. So
yeah, exactly. Mine already started out as shit. So you're headed towards me. I'm not headed towards you. Yeah, I lived in this little village, and in fact, the village that we lived in was even smaller than that. It was split. That was our town, and we lived across the valley in something that had maybe 6 houses and no amenities whatsoever. The place that we actually lived in was attached to another house, but it was the bakery originally for probably the town across the valley. And otherwise we were just surrounded by farmland. And the little village, we had, our oldest daughter is called Paris, named after the city. Or maybe Paris Hilton, or maybe Michael Jackson's daughter, or maybe there was a prostitute that lived not far from our house that was called Paris as well. People used to say to me, why Paris? Is it, what did you name? I'd say Paris Hilton. And they'd just look at me and go, really? And be like, no, that's a lie. I just made that up. It was Michael Jackson's daughter. And they're like, oh, what? And then I go, nah, not true. There's a place just close to where I live called Cunda Park. And there was a prostitute who lived in Cunda Park that, this is a true story, that ended up in the news a whole lot because, I don't know, the laws around prostitution in Australia or whatever it was. And at that time, so Paris Hilton was like going off the dial and love and hate. And then Michael Jackson's daughter wasn't really known like she isn't now. And then you had this prostitute that was in our local news. And I'd say, no, we named her after that, you know, like, and they were just like, we named her after the city. That's what we named her after, which is the truth of it. But she went to school, her first school was a French school. So we had to go to the Marie, and get permission for her to go to the school, which was just this tiny little school in a town that had a couple of shops, a bakery, not the one that we lived in, and a couple of bars, and that might have been it. I don't even think that it had a clothing store of any kind. And it was, I can't remember, maybe about 30 minutes or so to Bordeaux, 30 or 40 minutes to Bordeaux, maybe a little further. And Agen was, it was not far, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And Cahors, you know, people probably know Cahors, that was reasonably close. And then I used to work often in Toulouse. So I would drive from there to Toulouse, which was like 40 minutes or 50 minutes or something through the countryside.
So did you pick up a Toulouse accent?
No.
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 My favorite line that I used when I lived in France was schnipper roast beef. Roast beef, beef, roast beef, schnipper roast beef, meaning I'm not English. I'm not, for everybody, I am not like English. I'm not an English pig, basically. Roast beef is sort of
that's a slang for British. Yeah,
exactly. Roast beef?
Roast beef, yeah.
Roast slang for British. It can't be a flattering term, though.
Oh, no.
No, I mean, it's like a loving slang, but it's not really.
It's not loving.
I mean, even when it's called roast beef, it doesn't sound like loving slang.
Yeah, loving slang. Yeah, that was my favorite line. I'd say that. And then I'd say Nouveau Zealand because I'm a New Zealander, even though I live in Australia. I'd say Nouveau Zealand like this. And they would be like, yeah, it was just one of those really funny things. Oh, New Zealand's okay because of the All Blacks.
You're more accepted.
Yeah. Oh, rugby makes us accepted anywhere in the world that's a rugby playing nation. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it was kind of an interesting journey for me, that was. So then I want to go back to your sexiest spots. I want you to... Now that I've derailed our conversation, sexiest spots in France.
I think Rocamadour, the town that's built in the face of a cliff, it's something to see.
Yeah.
I think the mountains, like we used to travel to the French Alps as kids, like there is nothing like that. If you could go during the winter, it's always super magical. Annecy is really nice. The lake, like the town built around the lake is pretty cool. Also we used to go where food was. So Normandy was also the Mont Saint-Michel. We would drive there growing up and stop on the way and get like apple cider and, butter cookies and all of like the kind of like the local specialties, which is something I miss living from the US, is that every time we go to like a different state, I'm like, okay, what's good here? Like what's the local food? Okay, there is barbecue sauce. There is like, I don't know, cheesecake or whatever, but like,
it's not quite
but it's not really like handmade by, the local lady who's been doing that for 80 years. And I kind of miss that.
This is one of the things, the homogenization, and we'll talk about it with architecture as well, but the homogenization of our world, where, I don't know why this came to me when I was thinking of trying to say this. There's a Cracker Barrel. There's a Cracker Barrel in every place. And it's like America, to find the little artisan nuances, they exist, but man, you've got to dig to find them. That
Yeah.
they don't. Whereas in France, and I think this is why people become Francophiles, why they fall in love with the place, in Italy and stuff.
Yeah.
That person just makes enough to supply their village and stuff. And if you know, greedy Americans come along and go, oh, we'll buy a bunch of those for our friends. No, 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 no. You buy one. You buy one. It's just for you. Go. You know, it's because otherwise I can't feed the rest of my village. You know, they will want them too. And it's that not overproduction, not oversupply. It's a supply of enough. And you know that you can only get that at this time of the day because it'll be gone. Because these 30 people will be here to pick it up this morning. The magic of artisan product is that all the nuances that make us want to travel. Like it's, whether it be clothing, whether it be, you know, food, whether it be the nuances of architectural landscape that are in artisan things. That's the joy of exploration. And so often I think that I love America, don't get me wrong. I absolutely love America. So often I think that I'm there for the landscape and the people I'll meet along the way, as opposed to for the nuances, being able to dig down in and just find things that are just from that spot, just from there, and you can't find them somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate description, actually.
Yeah, that's not really it's far less common in the United States. Well, I mean, the country's so young too compared to everywhere else.
True.
It's so young.
Yeah.
But we also, generally speaking, we do like having anything and everything available now.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. I want avocados now.
Yeah. Makes no sense.
Always makes no sense.
It's not these. What are you talking about? Oh, you know, they're imported from like this place and this place. I'm like, yeah, but we could grow them here, just not right now. You know.
That's it.
Yeah, it's a different mindset. It's interesting.
Convenience is paramount.
Yeah.
You gotta deserve it though, you know.
Yeah. I'm kind of, I love the fact that, you know, you have to work with the thing as opposed to it just always has to work with you. And, you know, if we bounce that into architecture, we have a homogenization of style globally, thanks to, you know, Pinterest and Instagram and stuff. So we have this homogenization of style that I could go to America and in 5 states, I can find pretty much the same house, the same building, the same whatever. I could do the same in Australia. I could do the same in England. And we might have the local artisan nuances will be the regulations that say, I've got to do this or I've got to do this. That will be what's shaped the house more or the building more. And a lot of the local vernacular kind of gets lost in that because we can see so much. And I used to work in the fashion industry. And I used to travel to, say, Paris to rip off ideas, really, to look at ideas and be inspired. But we would do that. And I'd travel to, you know, like maybe Rome or Milan and do those things there as well. And I would be like, yeah, let's look in the department stores. Let's look in those things quick. I want a quick look at them. I just want a quick look. Now I want to be in the back streets and I want to find the person who still makes this thing this way or has a little boutique that they are making their own clothing. I want to see the innovator, not the early majority or the main majority of people. I want to see the innovator and be taken on a journey of what they're doing. And like it or hate it, doesn't really matter. I want to see their stuff. I want to see those creative people who are really raw and right at the cutting edge of what they're doing. One of the things I think that happens with architecture is it's not a big machine. It's got a big kind of, I want to say international kind of style, but it's not a big machine. It's not like that. It is little artisans making, oh, I'll draw that line there and oh, I'll add that. Oh, these people are like this. Oh, cool, I could do this. Or this is their story. Oh, great, I can do this. You know, that's the difference. So yeah, we'll get into homogenization. But before I do that, David, tell me, how the hell did you end up in architecture? why aren't you a photographer, or why aren't you a
dentist?
A
dentist.
dentist, yeah.
A dentist.
Let's start with dentist, yeah.
I could have been an orthodontist. I'd be very good at that, I think. Little braces and things.
Oh yeah, you do our teeth.
Yeah, well, so there's maybe two answers to that. The first is that when I was in high school, when I was having to choose my career for the rest of my life, I did an architecture summer camp at a university that lasted 3 weeks. It wasn't very long, and it was between my junior and senior year. And you live on campus for 3 weeks and you study architecture. And basically, it's like first year studio. So a lot of abstract stuff, making things out of cardboard, you're drawing things, you're having theoretical conversations, and you're making friends. And prior to that, though, I didn't want to do architecture. I wanted to do industrial design because I thought it'd be more fun to do like design cars and toasters and things like that. But the experience at that architecture summer camp was just so captivating, and I made some good friends there in that summer camp. And so it wasn't so much the architecture as I know it today that I fell in love with. It was more of just the experience of being in a studio with peers, working late at night, having pizza, cutting cardboard, and making stuff. And at that point, I wasn't thinking about like a career 20 years later. I was just thinking about what college is going to be like. And I thought if college means me cutting stuff out of cardboard and drawing things and having cool conversations, then that's what I'm going to do.
I'm going to do that.
So,
yeah.
That's it. And then, of course, in practice, it's like very different from how
they only showed you the sexy part.
It's going to be so different. Yeah.
Now it's like permitting and building code.
But I think honestly, that's probably a common story. I mean, for a lot of people who are creative, when they get into architecture school and they experience that studio setting, that's it. That's where you make, lifetime friends. And it is a lot of fun to do. I think the other aspect for me is that once I got into college and then did a master's, the expansive of what architecture is and how architects think is so much bigger than what you think it is of it before going through school. So I think once the door opened to all these other ideas and you realize that now you're studying and thinking about philosophy, culture, people, of the evolution of structures, like all this stuff, you can't really unsee that. Your vision changes to that scope. And that's also probably one of the reasons why I've stayed with it, because it's just more and more questions get brought up. And once that happens, I don't think there's any going back. And I think that's also the case for a lot of architects too.
I think that's a really valid point. Like once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And once you understand it, you can't ununderstand it. And you suddenly, that's probably a big calling to the doing it, like it's kind of the, I don't know, the reason behind it all.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the things the average person doesn't understand about the average architect is that even if you take an average architect and let's say they do mostly small houses for people, right? Which is like a noble way of practicing, but that's what they do. Most clients of that type of architect would think, okay, so you draw like nice looking houses and you do permitting, and that's like what you do houses. But I think, and that is true, and obviously
it is true. It is what they do, but then there's what they do.
Exactly. And I think that architect thinks of themselves in the context of that larger vision I was describing. And that's how all architects feel, even if in practice they aren't able to design whole cities and things, but that's how they approach their work and think about their work. And so even if they or we are doing one house, it's a very serious proposition. It's a very serious thing to do. It's a mark on the world. And I think that weight of architecture and the meaning of it, which is undeniable, again, is like something that you learn through school. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You can't not think that way.
Yeah, right. I totally get it. You said it's a mark on the world. And I have this discussion so often, like, let's just say we found a virgin piece of land that nobody else had really screwed with, and we're going to put a house on it. I go, we've got, beyond the responsibility of what it's going to cost and, getting it right for the client, we've got a responsibility to the planet. We're going to fuck up that piece of land forever by sticking a house on it. And so are we going to touch it lightly? Are we going to dig a big hole? What are we going to do to meet our client's brief, as well as what are we going to leave behind? Because even if they knock it down, it's still we've altered the piece of land it sits on. And even if we're taking a piece of land, a place that's being knocked down, and it hasn't been bulldozed into an estate already, so it's in its natural habitat, we're going to alter that. It's already been altered, and then we're going to play with it again. We're going to, shift that again. And I see that as one of our, hugest responsibilities. There's a guy called Mark Whalen who's on my podcast, and a house that he did was in Texas in the hill country, and we went to it, and it's a really kind of agrarian but modern agrarian home. One of the things that's really made, it's got a dog trot. So they do the dog trot. So they put a void right through the center, and then on one side they've got one part of living, on the other side they've got another part of living. And in this case it's 2 stories, so that creates the corridor in between, and it's designed really for the dogs to live in an old style house. And anyway, Texan dog trot. He's got this dog trot, and the front door of the house is actually not where you drive up to or anything like that. You walk into the dog trot, almost to the back of the dog trot, and it's on your left-hand side. And beside it, there's maybe about 2 foot wide, maybe 2.5 feet wide glass panel that has all the Indian arrowheads that they found directly on the building site, mounted beside the front door behind a glass panel. And I remember standing there and going, this was their home. This was their hunting ground. This was where they were. And Mark's put this filthy house here. No, I didn't think that. I thought Mark's done an amazing job of using the site. But the bottom line is that this was a hunting ground. This was a place that fed people, that did all those things. I'm not saying it doesn't do that now, but those were the natives of it. And they probably killed the natives that were there maybe as well. Maybe they, got rid of the Mexicans that were there. Who knows? I don't know. But there's a story to every bit of land, and we should be honoring the story of that land, not necessarily in the architecture, but just in being respectful enough to learn it. And so your mark on it's a mark on the world. I've got that written big on my pad here.
Well, I agree with you. And one of the things we were talking about the other day actually is, I think one of the very important questions all architects have to think about when they are starting a project is whether or not we should even be building anything to begin with, which is a crazy thing to say because it's like,
I'm gonna get more business.
Okay.
But how are we going to pay the bills?
Now we should build something. But it's a crazy thing to say, right? Because obviously the client's like, well, I need a house or I need an office building. What are you talking about? But I think at the very least, as a thought exercise, it has to be seriously considered, though. And I think that also bleeds over into another idea, which is to abandon preconceptions of what you're going to do, right? So it could be that the solution, and obviously if we're talking about houses, that there's general requirements everyone has for a house these days, but for more public-facing works, do you think about like, okay, well, to solve the issues at play here, the ones that are involve the environment, the culture, the society, all the stuff, do we need a building at all, or a building of the size? Can it be half the size? Maybe we have an outdoor space instead of a building. Like there's a lot of ways to approach solving the issue, whatever the core problem or issue is, that is not necessarily reliant on more square footage. And I think that's I think it's a very important thing to consider, as kind of crazy as that might sound.
I love it. I think that if you don't start back with the basic question, then you're already starting with a preconceived notion.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you were saying it, I was on a conference, and Todd Williams and Billy Tesson were speakers on the conference, and they bury a lot of their work. A lot of their work is sort of below ground. I think they're miners in a past life. They were coal miners. No, but they're not, a lot of the time their work isn't like about having this massive structure above the ground. It's about how does it integrate back in with the landscape and flow with the landscape. And, you know, I was talking to another architect the other day, and he was saying about burying a house. So he got a bit of flack about a building that he had done, and it is buried. And he said, for God's sake, the regulation said that I had to have this amount of native coverage. So he said, of course I buried the house. You know, I buried it back in, and I had grass and trees and stuff as part of its roof. And it took a lot to do that. But people were like, you know, well, why is it buried? You know, is that worse for the environment? No, for the environment, it means you don't see the damn thing. And it means that whilst, yes, we've dug a hole, this thing is integrated into the landscape. And so those kind of things are, you know, I think that thinking, as you say, so should there be a building at all is the first point. Like, and I have a thing which is, should this building, you know, especially when we've got land, should this building be where you think it should be as the owner? Because all too often people build a building on the spot that would be better for something else. It would be better for, you know, an open space, and, you know, a space that you can use that brings people together, you know, more of a, even if it's family, a community space and those kinds of things.
Yeah. I agree. That's one of the also the most common preconceptions of how clients think they should utilize an architect or what an architect does is like, again, just the building. And I know any architects would have experienced this where clients approach and say, I already know what I want. I know where it's going to go. It's going to be this square footage, this bedroom, bathroom count, X, Y, and Z. It's in this part of the lot, but I need you to make it look nice. Or maybe they might even say, can you make a floor plan works? But the first thing that we do, and any architect would do in that case, is just step way back away from all that information and look at the site and then propose like, well, how about you put the building on the other side of the lot? And they're like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. But that's the scope at which we start with. You have to, because if the site plan's not good, then it doesn't matter what the building is. It's not going to be a successful project.
Well, that's my biggest beef with what we call here project homes. So, you know, like when you've just got, you open the book and you choose plan B and it matches your budget, and, you know, they've bulldozed the site flat and
just stick it on.
Yeah, you stick it on and it looks similar to the one next door, but not the same. You know, it's a different facade. And
it's blue instead of like red or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're at the end of their imagination. And or they let you custom do the facade a little, you know, and then you've really got a bowl of soup. It's like one of the things is that in building or designing a home, the first thing we're looking at is siting. You know, we know there's an area we're going to put it in, and where's the light, air and noise and, you know, breezes and all these things going to come from that are going to make this house right for that piece of land. And none of those companies, whatever, do anything. You never open the book and it says, so if your site is northwest facing, these plans would be optimum for this site.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Why not? They're happy to draw 4 million homes and put them in a book. For fuck's sake, like just draw 4 million that are worth drawing. Suit sites. And if you're in California, this siting would be your optimum siting. Go and look for a piece of land with the optimum siting. So you can't afford that piece, so then go and buy the other piece that's cheaper. But then this would be the siting for this style home. It's not rocket science. Maybe it is. Maybe it is rocket science. But doesn't that, I mean, it just stands out to me like crazy that
it's crazy.
Siting's the number one thing, and then what you do with that siting is number two. And
and then, you know, like talking about sustainability, that's the first thing. If you place the building wrong on the site, then it's definitely gonna consume more energy, you know, it's gonna maybe not drain the water on site really well. Like that's like number one. You can buy like recycle materials and have solar panels and all of this stuff. But if it's not oriented right, and if it's not on the right location on site, then that's mistake number one.
Yeah.
I'm with you 100%. 100%. The number of renovations that we've done, major renovations we've done to houses over sort of the 20 years I've been doing this, and turned the house around, shifted this from this side to this side. It blows me away, and probably should have knocked them down, really, but it was still cheaper to renovate. So, the economics of it said renovate it.
Yeah. It is phenomenal how many bad houses there are.
It's beyond phenomenal. It's
like who made these things? Like, what were you
Some
thinking?
bad architects made those bad marks.
Yeah, exactly. They were architects. That's an architecturally designed home. That's the other thing. They want that in their marketing. They want to swing off the word architecture in their marketing, so it sounds like that this thing is of a higher value, and it's a piece of shit that just faces the wrong way, faces south when it should face north, or whatever.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And people buy the marketing story because they're not educated well enough to understand what they need to look for. And this is one of my big arguments is as people, I'm not an architect, I'm a building designer, but as a person who creates houses for people to live in, we need to educate the marketplace and our clients in how we approach something, so that they get the best of what we can do. You don't go to the doctor and go, oh, I've got a pain here.
Exactly.
Well,
so
some
she's
people
always
do.
saying,
Yeah.
Yeah, some people do. According to WebMD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But education is a big one, and that's something actually, before this recording, David was just on the call with a potential client, and the funny thing is that no matter if if somebody calls the office, no matter if they end up hiring us or not, like our mission is to always lead them on the right path to how things are supposed to be working, be aware of the main steps and the things that they should be aware to run away from, just because clients are not educated in those things, and there is no better place to find that education than within the profession itself. And if we don't advocate for sharing those types of information, then we can expect our client to be educated.
Again, that just sums it up. Like that is part of, and it's not something we get to charge for. It's something that we get to do because we care about what happens at the other end.
Yeah.
That just, a few years ago, client rang me, or potential client rang me, never became a client. And I said, just tell me that lot number and stuff. I'll just have a quick look while we're talking. So I had a look, and it was a new subdivision. Nice subdivision, large blocks. A lot of trees are being cleared. So there's a lot of eucalypts, which are like eucalyptus type trees, which is very common to our area. They're quite combustible. You're in California, we're in Australia. We both burn. In fact, we swap firefighters. When you guys are on fire, we send firefighters, and when we're on fire, you send firefighters. That's true. The countries swap firefighters. Yeah. Because they don't have the resources, and we don't have enough resources. So our Australian ones go to California and stuff when you're on fire, and your ones come to Australia when we're on fire. So with it, I just did a quick look, and there was a building area mapped that you had to, this was the designated building area on it. And it was in a BEL 40 at the back corner. So a BAL rating is a fire rating. That means you're going to build a bunker. On the back corner of that thing, it was running through where there was a BEL 40, and then there was a BEL 29. And we'd really like to build in a BEL 12 or none, but in a BEL 12 or something like that if we're going to do it. There was no part on that. There was a part on the site, but there was no part on the overlay and where they'd said the house piece had to be that was under a 29. And I said to her, I said, I know you've purchased this block. It's the best block in the thing, and it is. the house you're describing to me, you're not going to be able to build on it. And she's like, why? And I said, because of the building zone. And I said, I'm going to send you a couple of quick screenshots and you can take them because title hadn't been released yet on the subdivision. So they own it, but they don't own it yet. I said, you need to get this changed. And I did a screenshot and I drew a box down further and said, the same box, but just shifted it down and across. And I said, now you're in a bell 12 and 19. And everything you've described to me will be able to be done.
Wow.
Gotcha.
But otherwise, you're not getting that house. You'll be living behind block walls and screens and metal screens. You won't be viewing out and all the rest, all because of the fire zone alone. And I didn't even look at the slip overlay from there. I just was like, go do that. And if you can get that changed, then you're probably on the right piece of land. Otherwise, maybe sell it before you settle.
No, that's a great story. I mean, it's also, we are fairly often involved with clients when they're looking at properties for reasons like that. And we encourage clients, like, if you're looking at properties, try, if you can, find a good architect and have them be a resource for you. I don't advocate for architects being free services, resources for everybody, but
pay them to come and look at the land with them. Yeah, absolutely.
It's helpful. It's helpful. And because there's so many times we get clients who have just bought a property and they're super excited. We just bought this property. We have all these plans. And exactly to your story, I'm like, yeah, got some news for you, but I don't know who told you could do this. Actually, I do know it's a real estate agent who's telling me they can do all this stuff. And they don't know anything. But yeah, I agree.
That thing of, I had a client who had bought a piece of property, told that they could make it into multi-res with a duplex. And we have in this current, like where I live, you cannot put, we're in a little town, less about 5,000-6,000 people. I was just doing that.
Okay.
With that, we can't build a multi-res next door to a multi-res as an infill project. So we can build a multi-res, then we'll have a single res, and then we can build a multi-res, and we have a land size that we can't go above. And this client had bought a site that the real estate agent said it's over 800 square meters, so you can make it into multi-residential, being two places. Not, you wouldn't have got three on it, being two places. And I'm like, that's interesting, because there's 4 places next door on the one next door. I said, we're going to have some interesting planning conversations, because the code says right here that you can't do this, that you can't put one beside the other. And they're like, fucking real estate agent. And I'm like, well, the real estate agent, what they told you was the truth about the size of the block, but not about the position of the block. So I said, like, this is why you get somebody to check these things, especially when you're not just doing a single family home. When your aspirations are bigger.
No, that would be on a checklist for sure, is to have an architect do some research in that case. I mean, if you're staying in this single family, if it's zoned single family residential and you're staying within that, even if it's not a great site, we're pretty good at figuring it out. But still, sometimes it gets past a threshold where it's like, really should have spoken with somebody before you pulled the trigger on this. But it happened.
Before those money went from that account to that account. For you throw all your chips on the table and all the money went with them, put it all on black. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. It's hard too, because, obviously we're in these professions, so we have the insider's take, but for the average person, like, we're always advocating clients and homeowners to do research and become educated. But a lot of people, they just don't have the time. And I kind of get it, it's like, I don't have time to research 5 architects and understand this and that. I just want to go.
Well, so this is a really good question, isn't it? Or a good point that you're making is, how many architects should somebody research before they choose who they're going to use? And how should they research them?
That's a good question. So I think in one of our episodes at some point, we're like, client, if you're looking for an architect, you should probably talk to like 2 or 3, just to have kind of like the choice and also hear what they have to say, because they probably each come from a very different perspective. But when a potential client calls us and they're telling us that they're interviewing another like 3 to 5 architects, we're like, why? Just with the person you're vibing with, you feel good with, you want to work with for the next 2 years of your life on this project. Like we all went through supposedly the similar training. Right?
So the answer is that a client should talk to like 3, let's say, because 3 is always a magic number.
Yeah.
Unless they're talking to us, then they don't need to talk to anyone else.
If you ring fame, throw away the book. That's it. Just throw away the book. You're done. You're done. And in fact, you can talk to 2 architects immediately, because you can just ask David to put Marina on, and you're done. You're like,
you can role play the competitor. You could be a competitor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you know all his bad points. I mean, you can say, yeah, but he's not really like that. At home, do you know what he does at home?
I'm the one who makes the jokes usually, so you want to be around me.
That's
true.
I have go on, what did you say? I missed it.
No, she's the one that's social for sure.
Yeah,
we hang out with clients. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I'm serious and very focused if I need to, but also like loosening things up sometimes just helps get to the point faster. So
I think that with that social side of things, and this sounds probably a bit wrong, what happens is I like to say, look, the design's the easy part. Understanding you as a human and your habits and behaviors and your nuances is the part that we have to learn. So we don't want to just talk about design here. We want to talk about dinner, and we want to talk about what your morning routine is. We want to talk about what side of the bed you sleep on. We want to talk about, does this volume feel expansive or does it feel contained? What makes it feel intimate? What makes it feel grand? What are those words mean in your language? Because we're going to learn your language so understand you better to create a house. And it's the nuances of the conversation. It's the artisan that all of a sudden they say something and you go, what?
Yeah.
What did they say? And like, I'll go, what did you say then? And they'll say, oh, I said, okay, what does that mean? What are you telling me there? What is that about? And they will suddenly tell me a story about something that's meaningfully shaped their life. And I go, oh, okay. So if this means this, does this mean this? Does this mean this? And create a thread and then go, what does that mean when it comes to space? What does that mean when it comes to architecture? How does architecture respond to that story, emotion, feeling? I find that's the most, I say the design is easy. The design is what we do. It's what we do. And if there's an easy part to the job, it's going, the design part's the easy part. The rest of it's all the work. I do design all day long but the rest of it's the working part, which
and I think that's kind of like what we try to tell clients when we first talk to them or meet with them, is that you will hopefully hire a professional who can provide you those design services, but ultimately if you want the best outcome for your project, you want to find that chemistry with the architect that works for you, where you feel yourself, like you can say things the way you feel about them and not like you're contained, you're limited, you don't want to offend, like I don't like their idea, but I can't tell them I don't like their plan. That's the worst relationship. You don't want to you don't want to design your house working with an architect where you can't tell the architect you don't like what they're doing, because either it's not going to go very far or it's going to go in the wrong direction and you're not going to be happy. So,
but I also think so. I think there's 2 sides to that. One is the client has certain responsibilities to be first honest with themselves and their partner, which is a very big thing. And second, they have the responsibility to speak their minds to the architect. But to that second point, then there's the responsibility of the architect. Like the architect and the designer need to be very good at listening, but they also need to be very good at encouraging conversation and encouraging that kind of dialogue. Again, I think that to your point, it's oftentimes those conversations which might seem tangential to clients can be what sometimes it's the seed for the entire project. And I think that when architects that we've come across don't bother to understand the client in that way, you end up designing something that was based on a false premise to begin with. And they end up 3, 6, 9, 12 months into the process. Then they call us saying, we have this thing that we don't like. And my first thought, which I don't voice out loud necessarily, is how did you get 12 months into this process? And this far, 12 months is a long time. Like, that's a lot of time to allow for a bad design.
It's a lot of money.
Worse. And it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's because all the things you're mentioning, weren't there, and they weren't there from the beginning. You know, if a client doesn't feel like they can speak to the architect and the architect's not asking questions, the client's probably not going to offer the information that's important.
I'd like to thank Stetson Hats Australia for providing my amazing collection of open road Stetson hats. Since 1865, John B. Stetson has been crafting legendary headwear, adorning the heads of Western icons like Annie Oakley and George Custer. The open road hat debuted in 1937, beloved by artists, outlaws, presidents alike. Its timeless style fits the setting from city streets to open plains. Whether in the cab of a truck or my trusty Mini Cooper, the open road is all style. If you think hats aren't for you, you just haven't found the right one yet. Discover yours at stetsonaustralia.com or stetson.com if you're in the USA. Thanks, Stetson, for your support. Please share your Stetson moment by emailing me your photo to talkdesign@gmail.com. Let's celebrate the timeless allure of Stetson together. So when I first started my business, I reckon that probably 25% of my clients came with a set of plans that ultimately they couldn't afford to build. And so they would say, can you help me with this? And this was, 20 years ago sort of thing. And the first thing I would do, I learned this really quickly, was I would look on the plan and I would see what version of plan it was. So was it version like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O? What the fuck? This architect's done or designer's done how many versions of this plan?
Yeah.
And then I go, that means that in that journey, the client has learned a lot.
True.
And the architects learned a lot more and lost a lot more, I would say. But the client has learned a lot. They've become educated in a lot of different things. And at some point, they've just kept asking for more and more and more, and then it can't afford to be built. Yeah. That's basically it. It can be built, just can't be built on that budget. And so I recognized this, really early on, and I'm going, how do I solve this problem? Yeah. So how do I put the budget in? The budget always forms a part of the brief. How do I put the budget at the front of the brief and then get them to understand that even just with simple square meter rates or square foot rates, this is a viable project or not a viable project for what they're asking for. And I think that probably created a big basis for my practice still being going, is like being not just always designed to budget, because people don't know what they don't know yet, and you kind of open them up in a story, and then that story leads them to something else, and they may have more budget for that story. A friend of mine the other day were telling me that they had a job that, it was a lovely story, that Lake Flato turned down because it was only like about an $800,000 job, and probably the size of what the scope was a bit more defined than that. And they picked up the job, and I think they're 11 million with the client at the moment. So it wasn't a lack of money. It was just that they'd said, we think this would be a bit, their figure in their head started with 800,000 for this thing. And they'd said that was kind of their budget thing. And so they hadn't got through the process far enough that somebody had understood them And then they'd come to these other people and they'd said, yeah, okay. And then they'd started working with them because this piece, they said we could do something for that money.
Yeah.
And then the client was like, as the client went, oh, wow, you can do this, you can create this. The project has just kept growing and growing and growing across a whole farm. Or a whole ranch. Let's not get, it's not one $800,000 thing ended up at 11 million. It's multiple things that have come, but it's an $11 million client.
Yeah, that's
And
phenomenal.
That's really
it
cool.
is, like, it's really amazing. Like, I was sitting there going, I went, what? And they're like, yeah.
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 Good for them. Good for them. I mean, I think all architects, if we could know the client, the client's actual net worth and how much cash they have to spend, that would be a big thing, right?
Yeah.
And most people don't want to divulge how much money they actually have, and for obvious reasons. But there's always that guessing game at the beginning. You know, if someone says a budget of $2 million, you're like, is it 2 million though, or could it be 5 or 6?
It's hard because there is a range within design, right? Like, you don't want to propose things that people can afford because then, you know, it's not cool, right? But in the same time, if they could afford like 1 or 2 level higher than what they think they want, it might be worthwhile to put in front of their eyes and explore that option because it might be a game changer, right?
Yep.
And I think it's kind of the tricky part of what we do.
I'm 100% with you there. Like, we still explore because in the exploration, they're getting education. And so in that conceptual phase, if we're still exploring, we can say, look, this is going to be more than your budget to build if we do this. I want to show you what the possibilities could be. And we could tighten it in other areas. We could do these things, but we need to go on a journey and then we'll pull back from that journey. And what I find the trouble with that is most people don't want to give up what you've drawn on paper to come backwards, you know, but that's why always having a realistic or fairly realistic budget conversation all the way makes that the only way to get through that. Otherwise they feel like they're taking it away from them. Yeah. I want to talk about Nobby House.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Because we're going, I want to talk about what you're doing with that house, and I know that we're going to have some photos of it soon, and I want to be able to expose your work. Not expose it in a horrible way. This house is in San Francisco.
Said it in a creepy way a little bit.
It's really creepy. I want to expose your work. It's like trying to pull your underwear out and show it to everyone.
Yeah. What hidden things are buried in that project?
Yeah, exactly.
Bodies, you know.
Well, actually, well, real quick. So, how much time do you have? Because I had my calendar.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're probably good for another half an hour if that works,
cool.
and then you might have to run to something.
Yep, no worries.
But yeah, so the story of how that project started is kind of an interesting one. It ties into what we were talking about earlier, in that the client had recently, they were about to purchase this property, and then they reach out to us saying, we're about to buy this property, and before the deal is done, we want you to come and look at it, which was smart of them. And so we got the chance to do that, which made a big difference too. And it made the real estate agent, I think, very nervous when we arrived.
It was awkward.
But yeah, this was an example of a client engaging with us, before it was completely done.
It was awkward because we went when they were still in escrow. And so we visited the house, the agent was there, the offer was put down. And so we're there, kind of absorbing the vibe, understanding what is the house wants to be, what could it be. Nothing was wrong with it. It had been remodeled probably for the sale or a few years before the sale, but in a very vanilla, generic way. Like every home on the market gets remodeled. It kind of looked like that. There was nothing, it was kind of soulless. But you don't really want to say that when you're visiting a house that a client is about to close on. But the client really wanted us to tell them like what was our big vision for the house. And so it was kind of, again, it was a little bit awkward because I'm like, well, I think you need to redo the kitchen, you need to redo the bathroom, you need to redo basically everything. It's move-in ready, it's clean enough that you could technically move in.
Yeah.
But if you're bringing me here today to give you my opinion, I will have to be honest and give you my truthful opinion about what I think the house needs to become in order to be yours, right? So we kind of like spent time, on site, took photos and walk around and spoke with them quite a bit to understand like who they were as people. And what we did is, instead of the question on the spot, well, like, let us go back to the office, kind of digest this visit and that much information, and come back to you with what we think the vision could be. And I think at that time we had done 2 to 3 floor plan options, and like, kind of like you could touch the house very lightly, or you could kind of like redo it in a more extensive way. And because you're about to spend multiple millions on this property, I want you to consider what you want to do with it, being a responsible professional. And of course, when we presented the 3 different visions, the client wanted to go with the most extensive one, because that was the one that reflected really who they were as individual and as a family, and how they were planning to live in that house. So,
But I think the 3 options that we showed in that first presentation, which we do pretty much for all of our projects, and that's pretty common. There's 3 is a magic number, right? But we always intentionally, in the case of remodels, when it's natural, which is often the case, we have the range that ranges from like the least amount of intervention to the most. And usually the least is maybe what the client sort of had in mind, and then the most is like past that point. But I think to what you were talking about earlier is like you have to have the space for exploration and to dream.
Yeah.
And we tell clients that beforehand. Like we're not going to show you exactly what you're asking for. And by the way, most clients don't want that also. Most clients say, I'm going to you because I want you to tell me what it should be. So I have my ideas. I'd like to see them incorporated, but please tell me other things too.
Yeah,
And
educate me, take me on a journey, take me to somewhere. Like, this is why I'm paying you.
Yeah.
I'm not just paying you to come up with one floor plan that
Yeah.
works. I'm paying you
Yep.
to come up with a floor plan that works for me, and a space that works for me. Yeah.
And it's the first step we would take on any project, right? As architects, we would look at it, like took it around, try another iteration, and then you go to from like number 1 to number 30. And maybe out of the 30, there's 3 that stands out. So it's kind of like we're kind of exposing those options to them rather than like keeping them for ourselves and just show the best one. Because we also rarely think that we have a favorite, but it's not necessarily the best one. It really depends what you're trying to achieve, right?
Yeah.
although sometimes we show only one.
But
Depends on the thing too.
feelings, sometimes, there might be only one.
Yeah.
I would do the same sort of thing. Like I'm likely to go, look, I might work on, I don't know, 5, 6, but I would go, look, these are the 3 best for these reasons. Here's all the downsides of my plan. Here's all the things that I think are limitations to it. Here's all the things that I think that are great about it. Like it might be the block size or the width or whatever, so it's going to make this piece less than I would like. It's going to make this, I would have rather it had this wider hallway. But to get these to be these sizes, I can't manage that out of it, or to get these doorways to work like this, I can't get the circulation space out of this plan. But I've turned it on its head here, and I can do that there. But then the compromise is that I'm going to open this up to this. So then just getting a judge from them of what each compromise means, and what each benefit is.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think that oftentimes we work with clients in that same way. So there's a fair amount of conversation about understanding what makes something good and bad. And those conversations are heavier at the beginning of the design phases.
Yeah.
And as you move forward, you know them better, they know you. And also sometimes if the client's smart and they have good intuition, they also learn design also.
Yeah.
So later on, they don't have to be heavily involved, because a lot of people, everyone's busy, right? And they're like, I don't want to have exhaustive 2-hour meetings every week with you or every 2 weeks for the design. And it's like, well, that we might have more meetings in the beginning, but as we get going and the design becomes clearer, it's going to get cut down. And certainly we get the CDs, we're not going to talk to as much at all. We're just going to be doing technical work.
I think that's actually a really big point as well, is them understanding that you're kind of going to go away into the cave and actually make all the stuff that's needed to make this thing work at some point. And they go, where the fuck did they go? Where did they go? No, you've got to tell them that you're not going to be, we're not going to have to talk all the time. We're only just going to talk, maybe once a month through that time, and we'll just be giving you an update. But we don't need to do coffee. We don't need to do any of those things. And you certainly don't need to change what we're doing. because otherwise
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
going to
yeah,
get
yeah.
expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like that. And we tell clients this at the beginning, and we remind them when we are approaching construction documents. We're like, by the way, just as a reminder, like the bulk of our fee is going to be here, but you're not going to talk to us. It's going to be very weird because
Yeah.
you're used to seeing us once every 2 weeks for selecting all this cool stuff, and that's not going to be the case here. But just remember, it's worth it. Trust me, and
Yeah,
you got to
this
give
is
us
the
the time
piece.
to do it.
Yeah, otherwise you've got some pretty pictures. This is the
Exactly.
piece that's going to actually mean you're going to end up with a pretty house. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super well said, because most people, right, when they see the renderings, and sometimes renderings happen even like during schematic design.
Yeah.
We've had this before where we get through schematic design and our phases are pretty hefty. So by the end of SD, we have a lot of 3D images and clients are like, okay, we're done. Let's go. I'm like,
Yeah.
Still have design development, permitting, CDs, and
Yeah.
then pricing before we get to construction. So like we're months away. But yeah, I know I can understand from a client's perspective that when they see a pretty picture, it's like, well, I don't understand. It's there. It's as
That's
real
it.
as
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It's pretty fascinating. So tell me with Knobby House, what the name means, because I know there's a story behind that, because I asked earlier, and the brief from the client. So they got you out there to look at it. And then what was the brief? What happened next?
So with the brief, so we were very lucky in that the client said, as Marina mentioned earlier, they just really wanted to know what we thought it should be. So we had a lot of freedom. And so it really came down to understanding, obviously, programmatic requirements and understanding them as people. Like you said earlier, that was a big part of it. And that kind of drove the design. So they didn't have, it wasn't like some folks who are like, I must have this thing, I must have that thing, it must be in this style, in quotes. They were very, very open, which gave us very thankful and gratefully a lot of freedom to try things. And then over time, we found like the right solutions that made sense for them. But in terms of, beds, baths, and things like that, it ended up being 3 bedrooms. I don't know how many, kitchen, living, like fairly standard stuff in that regard. In terms of program, there were a few moments though where when we analyzed the existing house, it just didn't fit. Like there was an excess of, on the main level at least, there was an excess of extra spaces. So like our critique, like it was a fairly open floor plan, but you had like family kitchen, like tiny, tiny kitchen, this room, and that room. And our criticism was it really feels like you're stepping into a furniture showroom with all these miniature sets next to each other, walking through IKEA or something, and there's just all these different things. And so there's no continuity. It also didn't make sense for how they were going to be living.
It's funny because, when you visit a house, San Francisco was, a bit more traditional at some point, right? And then people like remodel and they take one wall down, two walls down, then you have a 15-foot ceiling and you don't know what to do with it and it starts to feel awkward. It was kind of a mix of that. Like the house felt like it had been partially torn apart, but not completely. Like the top floor was still very segmented between the spaces, but the first floor, the main floor, tried to be an open layout, but it wasn't really like flowing well. So it's a little bit like this house, who is an urban house in the city of San Francisco, who was trying to appeal to, people to live in it with a modern lifestyle, but wasn't quite understanding what that meant. So that was kind of our mission through the design and how we looked at the spaces and the architecture inside the house, was to try and make that more modern lifestyle flow between the spaces, between who walks through the spaces and the light, like really tie everything back together.
Yeah, cool. I think that's the job of an architect.
Probably.
Well, it should be, yeah. Well, if
Yeah.
there was somebody who did that, they should be called architects, I think.
Yeah.
So tell me about the name.
Oh, yeah, right. So the word nabi, N-A-B-I, is Korean for the word butterfly. And, it's a funny thing when you're tasked with naming projects, as we all are these days, it can be a very painful exercise.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, what do we call this thing? Because I think any architect listening would also agree that there's so many different ideas that are embedded in a project. Sometimes it's like, how do we know what we would call this? But there's basically two reasons that make that name have meaning. The first is that we had learned in getting to know the client when we visited their previous house to understand how they live, that the client loves butterflies.
Wow.
And they had some art pieces that centered around butterflies. That's one thing. And that ties also into the design of the project. So specifically, when you enter the house on the main level, there's this big, long white wall on the left-hand side, right? This massive white wall that went up the stairs, and that also faced the great room to the right. And the challenge for us was like, what do you do with this giant blank white wall that was just dominating? There's no features on, there's no nothing. And that's the wall that's of the adjoining house too. So we can't like dig into it.
You can't change it. Yeah.
No, we can't build out because there's no room to build out into the space. So we had this. This also ties into, I think, our ability to flex different muscles depending on the situation. So instead of doing an architectural intervention of building out or building in or doing a big surface treatment, we had the idea of doing an art installation that would kind of cover the entire wall. And there's this wonderful artist called Paul Volinsky is his name, and he does butterfly art installations. So we collaborated with them, and we'll send you a photograph of it. So there's basically these cobalt blue, like ultra blue butterflies that stick out from the wall, and they kind of sprinkle across the entire wall and go up the stairs.
Oh, wow.
And we like that idea because obviously client likes butterflies.
Yeah.
It solved the issue of this massive thing. It also fit into the client's desire to collect art. So this space has an art kind of theme. So now we have a wall art installation. And there's also the experience of when you're coming home and you open the front door, some of those butterflies are in special hinges that are kinetic. So they flutter ever so slightly, just a few of them. So when you open the door, there's a feeling of the butterflies sort of coming in with you, and they flicker as the breeze comes in.
Awesome.
And so that definitely fits, I think, the Nobby House theme. And then finally, I'll say that the creation of the house coincided with the client's desire for sort of a change of life by moving into San Francisco, which is a city. And so all of these things felt, appropriate with the idea of transformation.
I love it. I love it. I love those stories, and then finding the way to express them and tie it back to a whole bunch of emotions that will be with those people in that house always. Yeah, I think that's...
You should have explained it. You came up with the name, not me. It's all her. She gets to credit.
How did he
Does a
go?
good job, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He did well,
You've trained him well. You've trained him well.
Exactly. There's a script just beyond the screen that she wrote for me.
Exactly.
I'm not that organized.
Okay, so let's jump to Second Studio Pod. Tell me, I mean, everybody can go and listen, and they can go and listen to the story of why Second Studio Pod started, how it started, what that became, and what it has become. Tell me about your passion just for podcasting, and you have a very successful podcast, and how that passion gets released in it, as well as what it does for Fame Architecture for you guys to have a podcast like this.
That passion started because of you. So.
Oh, that's beautiful. We can finish there. We'll give you a moment.
Well, I think it started as a passion to talk about architecture, just naturally as we step into the professional world and kept having those conversations. I think the passion of podcasting about architecture has grown, and probably even more since we launched our practice, because we feel the need to stay connected to our profession and, interviewing people in the industry, reacting with the audience who listens to the episode, engaging into different kinds of conversation, debate, or even disagreement sometimes on some of those topics. I think just kind of like keeps us alive and excited about what we do. So that's what keeps us going and would keep us going, honestly. I think also tying back to the practice, because we've come to realize that a lot of clients are uneducated, now we feel like the podcast has the responsibility to help educate anyone who is curious about architecture, clients, high schoolers who want to, become architects, or whoever is interested in those topics. So that kind of like shifted a little bit the type of podcast that we've been producing for the last maybe 5 years or so.
A long
For the
time.
podcast? It's 7.
Well, we've been doing it for 7, but the content has
shifted
a little bit, and now is opened up more toward, anyone that is not also an architect that might be interested in listening. So
Yeah.
I think
we
that's an
we still have
interesting
a lot.
thing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think we still have a lot of things we could keep talking about because of now opening up to everyone listening
Yes.
to the show.
I must say, like, as I said to you guys before we started, one of the things I love is that you're a couple and you have couple nuances on your podcast, and you know, like, it's like there's attention and there's fun with it, and it relates to just how we live as couples, you know, like, as well as I said to you guys, you know, I'm envious of the fact that you guys have this little conversation that just is ongoing all the time, and you explore it together. It's beautiful that you can do that and disagree together, and, you know, like, just the fun of it and the discovery from guests as well. You know, there's a lot of discovery, and then you go afterwards, you can go, do you think that's shit, or do you think that's real? Do you really think that that's how it works? You know.
Well, it's funny. Like you had mentioned, I think before we started this conversation, that one of the things that happens with guests sometimes is that they come on the show and they have a whole kind of
Program.
story rehearsed exactly, and you can feel it too, right? Because when they're speaking, even if it's a captivating story, you can tell that they're not present in the moment, and they're not listening. Even if they're talking, they're not listening. And you just feel it. And I don't know if listeners can tell, but we certainly can. So part of our job in those cases is just to grind them down until we get past that. But I do think having two people is helpful on the show.
That's why I come in with the jokes, just to kind of like get them loose, you know?
Yeah. Get under the skin a little, just,
Yeah.
It is strategic in a sense.
Lift that. I know when I interviewed Tom Kundig, we ended up talking about drag racing on the salt flats, and it was really fun because Tom is interviewed an awful lot, and he an awesome guy, like really fabulous guy, but to find something that was outside of just that general, like, giving the speech, and you know, and it's still to do with all the gizmos and things like that, and the rawness of it, and you know, this whole hot rodding kind of thing that he loves was really fun to discover. And I find it when I'm podcasting, that same thing. Like, I don't want somebody who is going to give me their rote outcome. It's like I say, we could tell the story of the podcast, of your podcast. Go and listen to it. It's on there. It's on Second Studio Pod. Go and look it up. I don't need to tell it to you, you know. I have a couple more quick questions. First one is let's do a shout out first of all to Eric Dillman, and because that's how we actually ultimately ended up together. And then also Corey and Hannah from Walks Studio, you know, like Corey and you guys went to school together.
Yeah. That's real funny, that connection.
Is it? Got a story?
I mean, well, I didn't know that you guys knew each other, but you know,
I didn't know.
You didn't know that? Yeah. We've been corresponding, but yeah, no, Corey's an old classmate. I didn't know him super well in school because he was 1 or 2 years below me, and I did a gap year, so things got kind of confusing. But yeah, he and I have some close people in common for sure.
That's cool.
It's good.
Yeah, I've actually got Corey on my podcast somewhere way back in the early days of it, because he was talking about sort of health and wellness and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then when wasn't the last time I was in LA, it was the second to last time I was in LA, I caught up with him for coffee, and we had this really great business discussion. And he was saying, I'm thinking of doing this. I'm going, why would you do that? That's going to mean you've got this, and this, and then you would do that. You know, you need to get something like this in place first to support that, and da. And he sent me the most beautiful message after a couple of hours of, you know, drinking coffee and talking about these things, saying, this was, you know, like a little bit later on, he goes, I just signed our biggest project ever, and I'm so glad that we had our conversation, because it just steered me with clarity to where I needed to go to then do whatever with my studio. And so it was really cool. Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, that's probably 20 something years of experience in the business versus, you know, he's got a lot less than that. I've made a lot more mistakes. So, question. I'm going to start with you, David. I want Marina. Can you just block your ears, please, so you can't hear this question? No, I'm kidding.
What do I really think of her?
I got that in the email. It's okay.
Let's hear it.
You told me I'd have to manage her, you know. I mean, I know that.
I warned you.
Yeah. It's not like I wasn't warned. No, your favorite place in your own home, and what emotion, why is it your favorite place, and what emotion does it evoke? And you
It's a
can go
fantastic
first, David.
question. That's a good question. That's a really, I want to ask you, when did you come up with that question, and how did you get to coming up with that question?
He's stalling for time. You've already got your answer, and he's stalling.
No, I'm trying to steal your process for my own podcast.
I'll tell you why. So I developed a thing called an emotional floor plan, because clients feel houses and architecture needs to respond to feelings. So in creating an emotional floor plan, I was playing with this idea, and I went, how do I do that? How do I get under people's skin enough for them to tell me something that's going to make them vulnerable, and I get a better connection? And so I was really early on. So I had this idea, and I was playing with it. I was asking clients bits, but you know, you don't have that many clients. And I'd ask a few friends, and they'd tell me things, but I kind of knew them. So I'm like, I want something a bit rawer than that. And I did a podcast with a lady called Stephanie Thatcher from Utah, and she was on my show, and I said to her, so Stephanie, I asked her that question, and afterwards she said, man, that was like having therapy. And you know, I can't remember her answer. I've got it written down, and obviously it's on the podcast, but I think it was on her back porch. And then we got this whole thread of how that gave her the opportunity to connect with nature. And since then, I ask it of just about every guest. Yeah. And it's building, for me, it's building like a dossier of people's emotions in different spaces, and what they look to connect with, and how they see themselves in a space. So that's why I did it. And it has built more and more of my knowledge for when I'm talking with my clients, and I'm starting to create an emotional floor plan for them. And I tell them that's what I'm doing. And then we dig right into using emotional words, but that's their dictionary. You know, I say intimate, and David thinks he's getting it on, and Marina thinks she's got the door locked and's lying in the bath on her own, you know, like it's that whole difference in what that means, and how does a space respond to that? How does that mean, you know, what does it mean? And then what does that mean for them in their lives? And then when I'm designing, I can go, oh, okay, you know, like this feeling is best generated by these things for them, you know. So now you can give me your answer. Favorite space?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We've actually, I'll answer the question for sure, but we've started asking guests on our show. We used to always ask, like, you know, tell us where you're from and what it was like. But I asked them, describe what your childhood home was like, which is close to what
I've heard that. Yeah. I love that, because like if it was was it a great childhood home, as in, was it a great relationship in the home? Yeah. Or was it a shit relationship, and you spent all your friends' time at your neighbor's, you know, your friend's place or something? Yeah. And then was it like a 3-bed, you know, kitchen, dining and living all boxed into one thing? In fact, there was no real living. Did you eat your dinner on your lap every night? You know, what was that house like? Where are you coming from, and where are you going to? I asked a similar one around, you know, what were your grandparents, when you went on holidays, where would you go to as a family? What things would you do, especially if they've got a family? And what traditions did you have? And what of those traditions do you still carry through from then? You know, Marina, you're from France. What traditions do you do in the States that are anchored in your childhood and your memories that make you smile and bring you joy? What traditions happen that you
The
brought
fact that you have
past to
dessert
you?
after every meal.
Bring
So
it
that's
on.
definitely it.
It's a lifestyle. You end on a sweet note. That's the only
The fact
thing.
that Nutella has a role in life every 3 hours is the thing.
Now you make me sound like an addict.
Go you, girl.
No.
Yeah.
No, we don't have Nutella in the house. It's a policy because
Yeah.
of but okay, so to answer your question,
It's a good question.
so there's a lot of different parts of the house. I'll say two things. The first was I grew up in a relatively modestly sized kind of ranch style house. So on the outside, nothing interesting. My neighbors had the same exact floor plan as ours, and all the people in the cul-de-sac had the same floor plan. But the inside was a little bit different in that we had, I guess you'd call it vaulted ceilings with trusses exposed, and it meant down in the middle of the house was a hallway.
Mhm.
Narrow, typical hallway, nothing special, except that it opened up to 16 feet because of the point of the ceiling and
Yep.
the roof. And we had skylights that run down. We still have skylights that run down the center of that hallway.
Yeah, cool.
So I grew up in a place which at the time I didn't know was atypical. Now I know it is, where light would pour down through the skylights and cast really cool shadows all along the hallway. And one of the memories that I always have is when you're a kid and you're running down the hallway and the hallway seems, like 30, I don't know, well, it seems like 100 feet long when you're a kid.
I was about
right?
to say 20 times longer than it was.
Yeah, 20,
Yeah.
it's a stretch, and
Yeah.
the kind of golden light that would go through the skylights, hit the trusses, and then bounce, and then hit. We used to have quite dated carpet that was kind of goldish.
Yeah.
That as a moment has always stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it probably coincides with the feeling of summer too, but it's like when you exit your bedroom and you're running down that hallway, you're just opening out into like potential. Even though
Yeah.
you're opening to a living space, which was quite small, but it felt like a very large living space
Yeah.
with trusses and things like that.
And so in
Yeah.
your own home now?
That's a great question. Wherever there's the most sunlight.
Oh, there's the studio.
Not the studio. The studio is quite dark.
So,
Wherever there's the most sunlight.
And what does that do? Obviously, it takes you back to that love of the sunlight and the feeling of summer. What does that do for you emotionally? Like, what does it allow you to feel or be or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that we just, in general, the two of us, but I think a lot of people are so used to being in buildings that have very little natural daylight that now anytime I can experience natural daylight, it's refreshing. Obviously, it's a necessity, and this ties into wellness and health and all those kinds of things. But a lot of homes in the United States and California and a lot of other places, that's not really a thing. Everyone's windows are tiny and
They suffer.
there's not enough windows. And so anytime there is a moment where daylight comes through or there's blazing, that's the spot where you'll find me, if I can be, when I'm not in front of a machine computer.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Great answer. Marina, you're up.
Well, it depends what time of the day.
You're just your
Let's
favorite.
just
It's
put it-
your favorite. So you've got to actually underpin it. You've just got to choose one of them.
These are the rules of the game. Come on.
No, but I do
Yeah.
have to. The daytime one would be our home office because it sits on a mezzanine.
Or you mean the current place?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, my childhood home was just like a countryside home from
Oh
the
yeah, no,
1970s.
yeah,
There was nothing,
I'm current. Yeah.
glamorous. My dad put a lot of work in it, but it was not like
Yeah.
super
Sorry,
great.
Dad. Yeah.
I mean, he did a good job, but
You did an art.
not my dream home. But our current place, yeah, we have a home office that's on a kind of a mezzanine space that overlooks the living room. So the living room is kind of like 2-story tall. So it's this big volume. Do love in the morning, when it's like time to start the work day, go up the spiral stair to that mezzanine because I feel like it's kind of a metaphor of me going up in my creative mind, and going to work. I like the fact I'm going up rather than going horizontal into another space. And I feel isolated because I can't see the lower floor, but I know it's nearby, so it's
Yeah.
not distracting me. It's kind of an interesting, like the height elevation, I think is an interesting feeling. In the evening, I love my bedroom because we have this light that has a shade that's made with colored thread. And so the light comes out kind of pinkish. And
Yeah.
it's just like, when it's just time to chill, it's like safe space, it's relaxing, turn it on, and I just leave it on, and just walking by just kind of like, makes me feel a bit calmer.
I like that. I like that. And when you feel a bit calmer, who do you become? Hey, just lost you.
Oh, who do I become?
Yeah. Who do you
Uh,
become when you feel a bit calmer?
You become a sleepy person.
yeah.
You're a person who's asleep. Yeah.
A sleepy person. That's cool. That's cool. Okay. So then one last question.
Mm.
You have one last project that you can execute. This is it. There will never be another project. You have to hang it up. You can talk about architecture, but not your own from this point forward. But you've got one last project. What do you choose to do?
Hmm.
Should I answer first?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this will sound like completely egotistical, but I would design a city.
Yeah.
And I say that because, early interest in architecture, like I said, with the summer camp, but as I went through my education, I became more and more interested in urban design questions. So my thesis from undergrad and my graduate degree is both in urban design. And I've always been just as, if not more, interested in how the built environment impacts people and cultures rather than architecture itself, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could choose any final project, it would be something at a scale of like a neighborhood, something like that. Because I think that's where the real
Broadacre
impact,
City.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's where the real impact of architecture takes place. And I think architecture is oftentimes confined, obviously, to a plot of land. And I think architects should think beyond that, even if they're just doing a building. But I think having the ability to think beyond that and actually practice beyond that would be a pretty powerful thing.
Awesome. Marina, what would you do while he was busy doing that?
Yeah, I'm busy designing a city. What are you going to design?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Just make lunch? I mean, really, seriously, what are you going to do?
I don't even make lunch. So. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I was going to say an architecture school, but it's kind of, my school of architecture in Paris was a new building, and well, it was old and new. The old part was really cool. The new part was a bit confusing. So it's kind of a double-edged sword to design an architecture school. If you don't do a good job, then it might not be super inspiring for the students, and they might not even know that it's not good. But that made me think of designing a school for younger kids could be super interesting, because I feel like it would be great to have them experience space and understand building and light and materials and architecture from a very young age, in a way that is more, poetic and sensible than, more on the academic side. So I would say maybe, a school for young kids could be pretty interesting.
Love it.
That's a good one.
Love it. I
So
just actually, I think in both cases, I don't know that David's going to give you a spot to put the school in his town, but you guys can talk about that later.
Yeah, I have very stringent design guidelines.
Exactly. Don't just be thinking you'll play with more land than I'm going to give you. Yeah.
I will build mine on the moon. How about
Okay.
Yeah. There you go. Huh. Or get icon to print it on Mars.
Yeah.
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 I love that answer as well. I think that, like both of them, I love the expansiveness, definitely, of Dave, what you were saying, like, let's think big, let's think of this broad thing. I actually asked the same question of a guy called Jamie Jury, who's a horticulturalist here in Australia, and he's a TV star and stuff like that. And he has been on Oprah and things like that in America. And he comes out and does some house and garden television in America. And he said he would take a piece of the desert and where the land was worth nothing. And he said we would create not necessarily low cost housing, but a city out there in the desert where we would bring the horticulture that would be supported out there and slowly change that, but that people could go there and the cost of the land would be $1 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then they would have the money to build something from that because they weren't putting the money into the land. And
we've had casual and fun, but also semi-serious conversations with a lot of folks closer to our generation about something like that. Mainly the initial impetus is because the cost of housing is just so high, right? That there's got to be an alternative, and there's a lot of land. There's cheap land. It's just not in California or in certain areas of California, but it exists.
Yeah.
You know, why don't we do something? So maybe we'll see. Maybe it will happen.
Maybe it will. Maybe it will. And if not by you guys, maybe it inspires somebody else. And then, Marina, I just visited Arkansas and was with Marlon Blackwell and went to an Artie, and we went to a school that they'd designed there. And, you know, that famous red barn kind of thing that he's got, that's all part of that concept as well. And just seeing like how they approached a school was really fascinating as well. Like really, really cool. It was a lot of fun. Guys, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a fun conversation.
Likewise, we could keep going, but we have meetings to do.
Exactly. It is so much fun though, and it's so great to unearth like your thinking and your, you know, beyond what we hear from Second Studio Pod. And I would encourage all my listeners, go listen. If you don't already subscribe to Second Studio Pod. Enjoy the conversations and enjoy the nuances that them being a couple brings to this space. And if you're looking for a super swanky house somewhere, we didn't even talk about all the locations you work, anywhere in America and actually anywhere on the globe, these guys will go there. It's not that they're desperate for work. It's just that they want the experience. No,
that's well put. I like
it
that.
is. It's not about, it's the experience of the challenge of unpacking a new space in a new place and people and creating something that is meaningful on the land. You know, what did you say? It's a mark on the world. And I think that that's so much of it. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adrian. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Cool, guys.
Awesome. That was fun. This was great.
Hold on. Thank you for tuning into our conversation. I hope it left you both informed and inspired. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. And please don't hesitate to share your design thoughts with me. It's always a joy to hear from you. If you're like me and crave a deeper dive into design thinking, coupled with a love for travel and adventure, consider one of my architectural adventures. Join me and some of my wonderful design friends and embark on a journey of a lifetime. Apply for an unforgettable design experience at adrianramsey.com. With our clients spanning the globe, I firmly believe behind every great project are great people. If you're a great person and seeking to turn your dream into a reality, I'd be honored to design your home with you. Why not join the ranks of our exceptional clients and let's make your heart sing? Reach out to me at studio@ardesignhouse.com. That's studio@ardesignhouse.com, and let's get a conversation going and make your heart sing.